Facebook wasn't the top headline today, but it's certainly in the top 5. So I wanted to include it as part of the discussion today. The company has come out and disputed the testimony of the whistleblower, Frances Haugen, who testified in Congress yesterday afternoon. And it's made headlines because Mark Zuckerberg has come out with a detailed post that he sent to all employees, which includes details like starting reputational reviews for new products and deep dives into existing products to examine how they impact children. So regardless of sort of talked a little bit about the whistleblower comments, but mainly focused on sort of, kind of what they were doing here. And that's the piece that we're going to talk about just now. Is Facebook doing enough to handle this crisis? And I guess as we're all investors here, do you think it could impact the stock over the short term or the long term? Rachel, why don't you take a first cut at this?
All right. Yeah, it's interesting as I was thinking about this question, and I was thinking to myself, it's kind of important to you take a step back and you think about just how big a role social media plays in our lives today. And the conversation we're having now, even 20 years ago, would have seemed like such a foreign concept. You're thinking about you have to have reputational reviews of social media products to ensure they're not damaging people, because we live in a digital society and increasingly a digital world. And now, everything from talking to your family and friends to marketing your small business to, even accessing news sources for a lot of people, it happens on Facebook and or some of their related products like, Instagram, WhatsApp. WhatsApp is such a huge way for people to stay in touch in so many parts of the world. I know it has been for me and pretty much everyone I know, and it kind of travels internationally a lot. So you think of social media in the sense that it's a tool, and I often think about it as how it impacts your life is very much dependent on, how you use it. I think time will tell, personally speaking, as to whether Facebook is doing enough to deal with the crisis. I think part of what we're seeing now in a broad sense is damage control. I understand that there's been some key disputes from management regarding Frances Haugen's testimony. And I think, we need to see what happens with this congressional investigation and what it yields. I also think that, Facebook's management, they deserve to be heard and share their side of the story as well. I do think that if Facebook really wants to effectively handle this crisis, and in many ways it's a PR firestorm if nothing else, and in other ways it kind of raises some concerns on a much larger scale with regards to the role of social media. But I think they need to deal with these allegations face on. Did they know about this data that there was potentially very real world harm happening to, young people maybe using these platforms? And did they choose to continue with business as usual? I think these are very basic questions that people want answered. And I think until they answer those, if and when, there's going to be quite a bit of a firestorm around this subject. I do think also, though, to kind of play devil's advocate, there's also an element of human responsibility with these apps. Most of the time, nobody's, forcing you to use them. I think it would be healthy for me and pretty much everyone sometimes to sort of take a break from social media. I know sort of one of the arguments they were bringing forth was the idea that no teen under the age of, 13 is allowed to be on Facebook. And it's funny because I actually remember, growing up, a lot of my friends that I knew that were preteens found ways to get on. So that it does happen, and that there's young people using these apps. And many of them aren't at a place to discern harmful targeted ads. And I think that's where you have a problem. So I think they need to face it head on. I think they need to deal with some of these questions. I think there needs to be much better controls over this from Facebook's side and much better communication about what it knew and when. As to whether it will have a meaningful impact on the stock, I honestly think that remains to be seen. In terms of from a shareholder perspective, I I would say, I wouldn't be so interested in what's happening over a few days or weeks. I'd be looking more, okay, what's happening over a period of months or longer? Is this, consistently impacting the stock? Facebook's been through definitely its fair share of congressional scrutiny in the past. I think what we're going to want to see is what's happening in the coming months and if that's continuing to put downward pressure on the stock. But for now, from that particular vantage point, I don't think it's a particular area of concern.
Yeah, I agree. But those are some great points. I mean, especially like you said, this kind of firestorm situation isn't new to Facebook. They've been through a lot. It almost seems like almost continuous. I was thinking of, obviously there was a lot of heat on them in the U.S. presidential election around that, and even the IPO had a whole lot of controversy. I don't know if you recall that period, but Facebook does seem to be, I don't know if it's a lightning rod or what to these kind of controversies. But so I've been a Facebook shareholder for a few years, and I'm definitely not tempted to sell my stock because of this news personally. But I do think it highlights some risks that maybe they're worth watching, I guess, for investors. And because it's not I don't think it's a good thing when your product releases have to go through an extra layer of review to make sure they don't cause, press nightmares or impact the brand, or, hurt members of society and things like that. And I just kind of add that to, in the last couple months, we've had sort of a few of these challenges kind of show up in Facebook's in this regard. I'd put that, we had the iOS, Apple has been doing that iOS switchover, which has been allowing users to sort of opt out of targeted advertising. And we know that that's impacting Facebook's, the effectiveness of their ads, because they can't serve those targeted ads as much. And I've been seeing this from other companies that advertise on Facebook, for example. They talk about how they've had to switch some of their services, some of their ads into different platforms for that reason. And then we had more recently the Instagram for Kids, service they were kind of talking about that's been paused according to the reporting in the Wall Street Journal, and then these leaks, internal documents that have been sparking all these critical reviews in the Wall Street Journal and in these congressional hearings. So it's a kind of a tough environment for, I think, management to operate in. And it's that said, it's definitely a pillar of the internet, and we saw that with when the service went down for a couple hours this week. It has over 2 billion engaged users, and it's still growing. So there's not a challenge there, but I think it's worth understanding that it operates in a lot of sensitive areas that touch on really hot topics, sensitive topics: public health, election security, misinformation, self-esteem issues, teens, kids, and all these issues kind of raise the stakes for this stock, for making it maybe a little harder for Facebook to innovate when it's working on its platform than some of the other big tech stocks like Apple or Netflix.
Yeah, that's a great point, Dimitri. When I look at this, kind of what's going on with Facebook today, I'm really not surprised. From the beginning, Facebook was always set up with sort of trying to serve two masters. They have a set of users who use the platform, but their customers, the ones who pay for the platform, are really the advertisers. So, when you're it's hard to serve both, right? You have this set of users that has a certain set of criteria and want to have a great experience, but these advertisers as well, a little bit are aligned with these users having a great experience, but they want their ads shown. So, and for Facebook to make money, it's got to make sure that the advertisers are continue to be happy and continue to stay on the platform as well as its users. So I was looking at a book. There's a book by David Kirkpatrick that I highly recommend. It came out. It's an older book, but it's the inside story of Facebook from the beginning, and it's called The Facebook Effect. The inside story of the company that's connecting the world. And early on, you can see the struggle between growing the user base, as well as at the same time growing the customer base who's having to sort of pay for these. And from the beginning, this is something that the company has dealt with, had to deal with over time. About what it's doing today, and is it doing enough? I don't, it seems strange to me. I guess I don't know if they're doing enough, and I think absolutely Rachel's a great point about time will tell. But it's weird that all of a sudden now Zuckerberg's talking about reputational reviews. Well, where have these been there before? It's a social media platform. It's part of what you do on a social media platform is you interact. And so, this obviously could have been done way earlier. Regardless, I don't know that there's much that Facebook can do to screw this up. It is so connected. I remember a while back that people were upset at Facebook because of it's late to get on board for filtering political content or whatever the issue was, and everybody was like, "Drop Facebook." There were Twitter things about getting out of Facebook, and they didn't miss a beat. They may have moved some people. People may have deleted the app off their phone, but they've continued to grow exceedingly well, even as large as they are. So, this could be, I remember one of the congressmen talking about, this is their tobacco moment. Well, the tobacco companies survived. They still make money. And, the tobacco executives, to me, sort of handled that crisis the worst way that they could. And it's certainly not the growth companies that they were in the past, but they didn't disappear overnight. So this one will be interesting to watch for me anyway, from the sidelines.